Bumble. There's a game on the Nintendo 64 called Buck Bumble. There is a real game that you could go to stores and purchase with real money called Buck Bumble. Buck Bumble. I don't know if you understand. This game that I'm holding in my hands, that is real, and that is for the Nintendo 64, is called Buck Bumble. And it ain't that bad, to be honest. Buck Bumble! Buck Bumble. Seriously? Okay, I'll stop. Developed by Argonaut Games and released in North America on September 30th, 1998, Buck Bumble was one of the more unique N64 games released. I honestly can't think of other games like it. Upon release, Buck Bumble received generally positive reviews with the occasional negative review popping up here and there. But the question on our minds now is, how does it hold up today? First up is the story. If you care about spoilers for a game called Buck Bumble, then you can skip to this timestamp at any point. I'm putting this in here because I've gotten a few requests from people to do so. You don't want your Buck Bumble experience to be spoiled, do you? Alright, that's enough stalling. The story's setting is in England a few years after a chemical spill takes place. The chemicals have infected the insects of the area, mutating them. From the mutated insects emerges an evil group called the Herd, who plan on taking over the garden, and there's only one person who can stop them.
Hello, Reno! I am the Tick!
Actually, no, it's Buck Bumble. This initial story is told with a cutscene when you boot up the game. Any storytelling after that is done through these little messages before and after each mission. And the story moving forward is generally the same for every mission. Buck Bumble, get in there and shoot the guys. Good job, Buck Bumble. Now get in there and shoot the guys. You did it again! There's not a lot that they do, but I'm okay with that. At the very least, I understand what the story is, and it never really intrudes on the gameplay. Buck Bumble's controls are mostly good, but they have some negative qualities to them that I should point out. The button mapping is great, almost perfect. You move with the control stick, jump and fly with A, brake and float in the air with B, use your weapon with Z, change your weapon with left or down C, switch your camera angle with up C, and you can do a flip with right C or R. This button mapping works extremely well for this kind of game. How it actually controls is a little bit finicky. Taking off is very easy. Landing safely is not. Traveling by air is great. Traveling by foot is not. You got like 11 legs, Buck! Make them work! One of this game's unique qualities is that it's a flight simulator, but since you control a bee and not a plane, then there's stuff that you can do while grounded. However, movement on the ground simply isn't that great. It's an added feature that has no real point. Interesting, but not great in execution. Moving around in the air in general is fantastic. You can make sudden sharp turns at a moment's notice by use of the B button, and I didn't start doing this until later on in the game, but doing flips with R and right C come in handy a lot. If you double tap either one of them, then you'll do a flip and turn around, which is beyond helpful. The game is so flexible with how you can move, and it's great. I don't like stopping in midair to try to shoot enemies. Getting in the correct position is not exactly easy. It kind of reminds me of going into aiming mode in GoldenEye or Banjo-Tooie. It's not fun, but when it gets down to it, the controls are very intuitive, and I would argue that it controls better than other flight simulators that I've played for the N64. I'm looking at you, Aerofighters Assault, which I don't want to, because you look awful. Unlike Buck Bumble, hey, natural segues. When I was doing my research, I found that most people complain about the visuals in Buck Bumble, and why wouldn't they? Look at this! The first thing that you'll probably notice is the terrible draw distance. It looks awful. However, I think it's okay within the context of the game. The story has the whole chemical spill thing going on, so I see the draw distance as a chemical haze of sort. Much like how horror games used bad draw distance to set a mood, so does Buck Bumble. So I can let the draw distance slide. Now, just because I'm letting it slide doesn't mean that I don't think that it exists or isn't bad. I just think that it's excusable to an extent. What I can't let slide is the horrible, god-awful, poopy frame rate. Sometimes the frame rate gets so bad that I couldn't tell what was happening. The game at times just becomes a big yellow blur, and this was bad because the game would ask you to do things quickly, and it's hard to react when you can't see. The visual style that the game went for is just fine. Buck Bumble, enemies, and the scenery is pretty good. I don't want to become a broken record, but I really appreciate N64 games that knew their limits when it came to character design, so then they made things that worked. Buck Bumble's choices in terms of character designs and the general aesthetic are great, especially for the N64. It's just too bad that other aspects of visuals kind of hold it down. Buck Bumble plays similar to many other games. It has so many qualities to it, and the qualities mix really well. Buck Bumble takes almost all of the dogfighting flight simulator games and smacks small elements of something like Banjo-Kazooie into it. There are overall 19 missions in this game, and they actually differ quite a bit in terms of mission styles. Some missions are simple, like the first. It's a search and destroy level, which is pretty common in the game. This usually just consists of you searching every little area of the level and destroying enemies. Pretty straightforward. One thing that I want to note about this is that the enemies do a good job at being different from one another. There are enemies that fly around in the air and some that are grounded. There's also another version of search and destroy, but instead of enemies, it's destroying stuff like generators and whatnot. Some of these will just take one shot, while others will require you to really lay into them. Usually when that's the case, they're being heavily guarded, so you'll have to take out enemies around them. Then there were levels where you had to race against time. You usually have to escape from an explosion of sorts, and there's one mission where you have to protect the base before it's destroyed, and even one where you have to give chase to some enemies. One mission in particular requires you to both search and destroy and race against the clock. The mission styles varied enough to where I never felt like they got monotonous. With all of this said though, Buck Bumble, while having a certain uniqueness to it, doesn't necessarily do anything incredible. It's fairly well designed, but not a lot sticks out as great. Yep, Buck Bumble sure does have a lot of good things going for it. Except for one glaring issue. Do not give me that sass, I will end you. Most of the levels are pretty short, which I think is great because unfortunately, this game kinda teaches by having you fail first. Sometimes I would fail at the very end of the level, and even though I'd be upset, I wasn't too bothered because the levels are pretty short. But I would be a hypocrite if I said that trial and error design is good. It's not. Like for example, I mentioned the race against time missions. These missions seem very reliant on you messing up, so you would have to come back and retry them. There were a lot of moments where it seemed like the game would trap me, so then I'd have to take note of the trap and just avoid it on the next go. There wasn't a single race against the clock mission that I could beat in one try. Although that might just be that I suck. Another example of questionable design is that in some of the levels, you'll find these red beams. If you approach these red beams, then they'll pull you in and attack you, and more than likely, you'll die. The problem is that they don't tell you how these work, so you'll have to die to figure it out. Unfortunately, that's how a lot of this game works. That's bad design, bad game, bad. Oh, now you've gone and wet yourself. Again. The game kind of benefits from having shorter levels though. I usually never bring up replayability, but Buck Bumble is one of the most replayable N64 games I've reviewed. And why? Like I said, the levels are short and also the weapons. You get quite the variety of weapons and you can tackle a level in many different ways because of it. You have weapons like your standard laser, grenade launchers, weapons that seek out enemies, and whatever this awesome thing is. Oh! Yeah. Going into a level and experimenting with the weapons is one of the best aspects of the game. One reason why I think I was so okay with replaying levels is because this is a game with a score. Look at it! I know that I've played other games where they have points and keep score, and usually I don't talk about it, but with how good this game can be, it's fun to go back and try to beat your previous score. Getting a high score also incentivizes you to beat the levels efficiently, both in destroying many enemies and doing everything quickly, because as time goes on, your score will go down, and you can see your score going down just taunting you. I also really like how this game does its bosses. For example, the first boss that you fight is this guy. After you beat it, it will appear as just a standard enemy later on in the game. The same thing happens with the next two boss fights. There's something interesting about taking on a boss and struggling with it, and then later on in the game, coming across the same boss and easily taking it down because you've improved. I do have to say though that the final boss is a bit too easy. After I've learned a lot of the techniques later on in the game and perfected my craft, the final boss was a piece of cake. I think they knew this though because it has two forms, but even still, too easy. And there it was, Buck. Wait a second. 2-player? Are you telling me that I can share my bumbling Buck experience with a loved one? It's the greatest gift of them all! The first bonus mode is Buck Battle, which is almost exactly what you'd expect from this kind of game. You and a friend try to kill each other. You set how many kills you need to get, and you go at it. This has a nice variety of stages, and unlike Star Fox 64's multiplayer, where the stages are just palette swaps essentially, Buck Bumbles actually seem to serve a purpose. You could land and try to hide, and some levels better serve sneak attacks, while others put you out in the open. You have to change your style depending on the stage. I didn't think that this was bad at all, and I had a lot of fun. It was Soniator's first time playing the game though, and because it was in a competitive setting, she both hated and loved it. The second bonus mode is Buzzball. It's soccer, but with bees! Your objective is to fly into the giant ball and hit it into the goal. Sounds easy, right? Wrong! Hitting the ball accurately is so difficult, so they decided to go ahead and give you the grenade launcher, which will let you get big hits to send the ball flying. This is actually an incredibly fun mode, but I would be lying to you if I said it wasn't hard to control. A lot of this mode is just fumbling around to try to accurately hit the ball. One of my biggest complaints about Buzzball is that it lacks music, kind of a mood killer. Now, if you know about Buck Bumble, then you at the very least have to know about the main theme. In fact, there's a chance that you know about the main theme, but have no idea what Buck Bumble is.
What about now? It's time to rock with the biggity Buck Bumble.
What?
Now it's time to rock with the biggity Buck Bumble. Bum to the bump to the bump to the bass.
What? I'm not exaggerating when I say this, but when I first turned on Buck Bumble and heard this main theme, I laughed harder than I have in years. I stayed on the main menu for about 30 minutes to just listen to it. I'm not saying that it's good or bad, but it is, in its own right, absolutely amazing. And all other tracks in Buck Bumble, unfortunately, can't match up even a little bit. Apparently the music was done by Justin Charvona, or at least the main theme was. And like I said, besides the main theme, not a lot of the music is particularly good. There's also not a lot of music in the game altogether. With as many missions there are, are, a lot of the music gets repeated, and a lot of it gets old. It's very lacking in the quantity category, but quality over quantity, right? I would make that argument if the music was great, but it's simply not. It's not catchy, it doesn't stick out, there's nothing great about it. And to end on one final negative note, a lot of the music sounds the same, so it comes off as uninspired. They took all the creativity and put it into this masterpiece.
To the bump, to the bumper.
What is this?
Bump to the bump, to the bump.
I love it! So, what are my overall thoughts in the game? I'll be honest, I went into this game thinking that it was going to be utter garbage. With a name like Buck Bumble, I expected easy jokes and a bad game. Well, it turns out that I got easy jokes and a very solid game. Buck Bumble is surprisingly good if you can get past the visuals. The varied styles of missions and great controls blend to create a game that I can't help but praise. I really enjoyed the search and destroy missions, and while the race against time missions weren't exactly expertly designed, I still thought they were fine. It's overall one of the most replayable games on the N64, and I definitely recommend it. Buck Bumble is a very solid game. Well, that was Buck Bumble. I kind of want to say something before I end this video. I've been trying my hardest to try to make my content more viewer-friendly. By that I mean I'm no longer saying bad words. So I think instead of actually saying bad words, I'm just going to replace them all with Buck Bumble. It'll be fun! Go out today and call your mom a Buck Bumble. Because why the Buck Bumble not? See, I'm already having a good time! Thanks for watching my video, guys and girls alike. Kind of a short one today, but that's alright. If you want to go ahead and watch another review of mine, then I recommend watching my review of Midway's Greatest Arcade Hits Volume 1. If that's not going to tickle your fancy, then maybe you'd like my Dobutsu no Mori, Animal Crossing for the N64 versus Harvest Moon 64 video. Check them out if you have the time. Once again, thanks for watching. Until next time.